Pretty remarkable sight today to see people driving on the Coquihalla, not just essential vehicles like trucks and buses, but everybody. The deluge that hit parts of British Columbia in November caused flooding and mudslides that left behind a scarred landscape, including destroyed bridges, washed out roads. And since then, crews have been working around the clock to rehabilitate those key arteries, including a roughly 200-kilometer stretch of road called the Coquihalla Highway. So vital, it was reopened again to essential traffic back on December the 20th, so just a little more than a month after it was damaged. And well, today it reopened, as I mentioned, to all traffic, far ahead of schedule. An engineering marvel, if you look at it, or a work marvel to rehabilitate the road so quickly to open it up as it is. For more on the challenges and complexities of that cleanup and the reopening, I'm joined by Carolyn Andrews, the president and CEO of the Association of Consulting Engineering Companies. Carolyn, thanks for staying up for the show.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Ben.
For our listeners who don't know, just so you can put this into perspective, how important is that stretch of road in this province?
It's pretty critical. So, that road has been in place since the 80s, and it's the primary connection, obviously, between the Lower Mainland all the way through to Edmonton, and carries, commercial traffic to some of the larger centres outside the Lower Mainland. It's the main link, and without it, goods don't move, people can't get around, and a lot of communities have limited access without that road. So it's kind of an important one.
Yeah, kind of a big deal, as they would say.
Mm-hmm.
Carolyn, take me back to those few days in November. I know about 200 millimeters of rain fell in that area. How bad was the damage to that stretch of road?
Yeah, it was severe, and I think the important thing too is that the damage was very widespread. We had failures all across the southern coast and southern interior region. And so, we had no road access at all. All lines were essentially severed. On the Coquihalla, there were multiple bridge failures. There were landslides across the road, and communities like the tiny community of Othello were completely isolated as a result.
If I could ask you to put your engineering hat on, what kind of challenge is that from an engineering perspective?
Yeah, I think, we have to sort of step back and really look at the corridor as a whole. It's already very complex, even under good conditions. So there's the natural environment, very challenging terrain, soil conditions, geology, lots of stream crossings. In the winter, you get avalanche. The climate is really unusual. There's strong weather patterns. They happen really quickly. And the road itself is relatively isolated. So unlike other major stretches of highway, for instance, if you look at something important like the Queen Elizabeth Highway through southern Ontario, there's a lot of places to get on and off that highway and to use bypass options. You just don't have that for the Coquihalla. So when you layer in then this extreme weather event, things were very dynamic. You could see that in the news that was coming out. There was massive destruction. And that sort of environment, it makes it very difficult to do even simple things like move in the kind of equipment that you need in order to start making repairs. We didn't have good geographic information either. Typically, you'd have lots of data over the corridor, good imaging that you can kind of try and figure out what's going on. But we didn't have that because the environment was so significantly changed by that weather event.
You mentioned back in an article, I think back in December, when the road first reopened to essential traffic very quickly, that it had been, you quote, really remarkable. But you also said that it was not the end of the effort. How remarkable was it to get it open just to essential traffic in December? And how remarkable has it been to get it open today to other traffic?
Yeah, that may have been kind of an understatement, I think, at the time.
By all means, yeah, please explain.
The Ministry of Transportation is responsible for that road. When that artery was initially severed, they came out and said it certainly will be months. It could be much longer. And I think within the engineering community, we thought they were being optimistic at that point. And that was just because we didn't have the information necessary to start getting in there and making repairs. The primary effort really is coming from the partnership between those crews that are out there doing road maintenance and have the heavy equipment, and then the engineers that were able to make sort of snap decisions, on-site decisions about what was viable and what was not viable. A lot of the work there was very traditional, heavy engineering work. So, infill, adding what's called riprap, or the sort of large blocks, big rocks or interlocking concrete blocks. And, in some cases, obviously being able to use one side of the highway that was in better shape, so rerouting traffic as well. There wasn't a lot of technology deployed. This was really a case of really understanding what structures continued to exist, what was washed away, where we could infill, and where new temporary structures would need to be installed.
I'm speaking with Carolyn Andrews, President and CEO of the Association of Consulting Engineering Companies, about the reopening of the Coquihalla today, just a little more than 2 months after it was severely damaged by those heavy rainstorms, flooding and mudslides in British Columbia. Looking forward, I know there's been a lot of talk about trying to build back better, or build back stronger at least, and try to mitigate some of these disasters going forward. How is that factored into the rebuilding, and where does that go from now?
Yeah, so what's happened now, and the way that the road is operating today, that's a temporary fix. So that's sort of an emergency response. And then anything, those repairs are being monitored, but that full integration, that's really going to take much more time. It'll be done under a separate program that the ministry the province is procuring now with construction and design firms. I think there'll be a big important thing that we have to do, which is to really understand what happened at the event. How do we characterize it? What was the maximum water that we saw? And we need to agree as an integrated team, the owner, which is the province, the design expertise in engineering and geoscience community, and then the contractors who are going to do the work and maintain it subsequent to repairs. How do we adapt that infrastructure to be more resilient? So we need to understand the risk, which is helpful to have the event characterization. We need to look at the importance of the structures, and this event gave us a lot better idea of how important those structures are. And then we need to understand as a community how much we're willing to invest to avoid damage in the future. And when we talk about resilience and building back better, this is not a discussion about eliminating potential failure. It's really about looking at that whole system, how things work together. There's a lot of other infrastructure in that corridor as well that's pretty critical, like gas pipelines, and making smart choices that accommodate a wider range of events, or things that make repair easier when damage occurs. There are some design decisions that were made when that was put in place that were the right decisions at the time that led to some more severe damage. And if we can reconsider that, then it gives us the opportunity that when damage does occur, that the designs are more tolerant to that damage, and so the repair becomes simpler at the time.
Certainly good advice for road building right across the country as we anticipate more of these severe weather events going forward. Carolyn Andrews, thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you, Ben. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. Carolyn Andrews, President and CEO at the Association of Consulting Engineering Companies, talking about the reopening, at least the reopening of the Coquihalla today here in British Columbia.